Warning: if you have an intense fear of ants, spiders, wasps, ticks, giant robots, flying saucers, or giant explosive balls of light, please avoid this review. Any who don't have these fears may develop them soon after the end. When I started to go through this game for this review, I thought I was still going to have the same reaction to it that I had when I first beat it. I can say this: not playing a game for several years can easily change your tune after some time. I was interested in the series for a while, and I didn't have a system to play any of the original titles. When I found out that this game existed, I was excited, then I finished it. Was not at all what I expected. Guess this is what happens when you think the spin-off would be like the original. If you asked me back then if I would recommend it, I would have said no. What made me change my tune? Come on down and we'll talk about Earth Defense Force, Insect Armageddon. Insect Armageddon released on July 5th, 2011. It was developed by Vicious Cycle Software, who worked on titles like... Hold on. Robotech Battlecry, Deadhead Fred, and a lot of cartoon and movie-based games. Huh. Not gonna lie, I'm a little surprised that these guys worked on two other titles I've played in the past. One being a mech game and the other one a beat 'em up. Well, Vicious got its hands on the rights to make an EDF spin-off based on the idea of what would happen if the EDF was based in the United States. EDF is usually developed by Sandlot, and have been working on the main titles from the very beginning, and looking at their releases, have pretty much only worked on EDF since 2011. It seems like pure insanity, but they're still going at it even to this day. I'll talk more about the main series when I review one of them, but let's get back to Insect Armageddon. Insect Armageddon takes place in New Detroit, which has started becoming swarmed by giant insects. You play as Lightning, a commander of a strike force called Strike Force Lightning. You go around destroying giant insects, giant mechs, and flying drones, getting from one point to the next, all while you get story in the background on what's currently happening with the city and the world. The campaign for the story isn't very long. My attempt at it on normal took me about 3 hours to complete, but the game does suffer from one thing: early 90s difficulty syndrome. The act of increasing the replayability of a game by locking the better endings on higher difficulties. There are 3 different endings to the game, each one unlocked for each difficulty, which is great because the main series difficulty normally goes up to 5. For the gameplay, it sort of runs parallel with how EDF normally plays. It has moments where it feels sort of like an arcade game than what the series normally does, which makes a bit of sense that it shows a score during the mission and a scoreboard at the end of it all with a KDR attached to it. Instead of calling them classes, you choose armors you can use during missions. The armors each have different ways to play through the game. You have the Trooper, who has the most weapons to choose from, the Jet, who has the ability to fly through the air and use weapons that use the same energy, the Tactical, which can use different turrets and radar, and finally, Battle, which is the tank armor and uses the strongest weapons and even has a shield. During the campaign, you get thrown so many new things, it's a bit crazy. The first mission introduces the ants, the anthills, and the hectors. The next mission introduces the ticks and the drones. That's only the first 2 missions. Honestly, it keeps the game from getting boring, which is a good thing for a short campaign. If it does get boring, there is also Campaign Remix, where it replaces some of the enemies with some of the ones you see later on in the game, which I actually found this a little bit more engaging for me. In terms of multiplayer, there is 3-player co-op for the campaign, which you can have bots to help you out if you don't have anyone else with you. There is also a survival mode that can allow up to 6 players, but the only armor allowed is the Trooper armor. The game mentions that there are over 300 different weapons across all the armor classes. These can range from the regular assault rifle, a rocket launcher, to even laser rifles, and there are a lot more than what I've mentioned so far. To use some of them, you need to level up that specific armor class to not only use the next tier of weapons, but to also upgrade the armor and the abilities that armor possesses. The first 5 levels aren't that difficult to go up to. You can easily get to level 4 by the end of the campaign. But after hitting 5, the grind gets real. Very real. There are several main gameplay differences that Insect Armageddon did that the main series didn't do. For one, there is a shop mechanic in the game, where the mainline series had you get weapons at random. Increasing armor and using stronger weapons are also tied to a leveling system that didn't exist in the EDF series. The game is also the first of any EDF title to introduce the revive mechanic. There is also an active reload mechanic where you can hit the reload button at the right moment to cut the reload time in half. The graphics for the game are still somewhat good. It does show its age, but it doesn't look that bad. The armors are all battle scarred and the insects are all horrifying to look at. Especially when the spiders decide to jump just shy of hitting you and you see their faces. Some do look a bit silly, like the praying mantis. Granted, you won't laugh for too long when it actually takes a large chunk of your health on the first encounter. And that's EDF Insect Armageddon. My verdict is a recommendation. I mentioned before that I actually hated the game the first time I played it. Well, that was true in the past, but I think the main reason I hated it was because I thought it would have played like one of the main series games. It was my first taste of playing an EDF game, and I thought it would play like the original. After giving it years of not touching this version, and having played 4.1 and still going through 5, I can actually appreciate what Insect Armageddon was doing, and what it did for the series. I can honestly recommend Insect Armageddon for those who want to try an EDF game. It will have some differences, I can honestly say that. But it is also the cheapest alternative to the others, only costing about $10 on Steam. If you feel like trying one of the main titles, EDF 4.1 costs only $20 on Steam. I'll review 4.1 on a later date, but for now, go out there and kill some bugs.